Something happened to a family on what was supposed to be the best vacation of their lives. They had planned it for months. Saved up, counted down the days, and on the very first night, in a hotel room that looked perfectly normal, something moved in the dark that had no reason to be there. No explanation, no logical answer, just pure cold fear. If you've ever felt uneasy in an unfamiliar place, if you've ever woken up in a hotel room and felt like something was watching you, stay with me, because what you're about to hear is real. These are not legends. These are not campfire stories made up to scare children. These are accounts from real people who went on vacation and came back changed forever. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Fear Sermon, and tonight, we have 3 true scary stories that actually happened on vacation. Make sure you're somewhere comfortable before we begin, because once these stories get under your skin, they don't leave easily. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and give this video a like, because we post stories like this every single week, and you do not want to miss what's coming. Let's begin with the first story. Her name was Rachel. She was 31 years old, a schoolteacher from Ohio, the kind of person who liked things orderly and predictable. She graded papers on time. She kept a planner. She didn't believe in ghosts, or at least she didn't used to. In the summer of 2019, Rachel decided to treat herself to a solo vacation. She had just come out of a long relationship, and her friends encouraged her to get away, clear her head, start fresh. She chose Savannah, Georgia, because she'd always heard it was beautiful. Spanish moss draping over old cobblestone streets, historic architecture, warm evenings perfect for walking around with a glass of sweet tea. What she didn't fully research, or maybe chose to ignore, was that Savannah is also considered one of the most haunted cities in the entire United States. That detail would matter very much before her trip was over. She booked a room at a historic inn right in the heart of the city, the kind of place with antique furniture and creaking floors and portraits of people long dead hanging in the hallways. She thought it was charming. She checked in on a Friday evening, unpacked her bags, and went out to explore the city. Dinner at a little restaurant on the riverfront, a walk through one of the famous squares, and then back to the inn around 10 at night, pleasantly tired, feeling good about her decision to come here alone. She brushed her teeth, set her phone on the nightstand, and fell asleep quickly. At approximately 2 in the morning, Rachel woke up. She didn't know why at first. There was no sound, no noise from the hallway, no car alarm outside. Nothing to explain why her eyes had snapped open with such sudden alertness. She lay there in the dark for a moment, letting her eyes adjust. The room was still. The curtains were closed. The ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. She told herself she'd just woken up the way you sometimes do in a new place, your body not yet adjusted to the unfamiliar environment. She reached for her phone to check the time, confirmed it was 2:08 a.m. and set it back down, and that's when she heard it. Breathing not her own, slow, steady, deliberate breathing coming from the corner of the room near the armoire. Rachel told herself it was the air conditioning. She told herself it was the old building settling. She told herself every rational thing she could think of, but her body wasn't buying any of it, because every single hair on her arms was standing straight up. She reached for the lamp on the nightstand and turned it on. The light flooded the room. The corner was empty. The armoire stood there, dark wood, ornate handles, perfectly still. Nothing was there. Of course, nothing was there. She sat up in bed, heart hammering, and laughed a little at herself. Just nerves, she thought. New place, historic building, your brain playing tricks on you. She turned the lamp off and lay back down. 20 minutes later, the breathing started again. This time it was closer. Rachel did not move. She lay completely still, her eyes wide open in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and she listened. It was rhythmic, in and out, the way a person breathes when they're standing still and watching something. She said later that the most terrifying part wasn't the sound itself. It was the quality of it. It had intention. It sounded like something that was aware she was there. She slowly turned her head toward the side of the bed and saw nothing. But the breathing continued. It was right there, right beside the bed, maybe 2 feet away, at about the height of someone standing and looking down at her. Rachel said she made a decision in that moment. She didn't scream, she didn't run. She reached very slowly for her phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung it toward the sound. The beam of light cut across the room. There was nobody there, but as soon as the light hit that space, the breathing stopped. Completely cut off, like someone had flipped a switch. The room was silent. Rachel sat up, turned on every light in the room, and sat on the bed with her back against the headboard until the sun came up. She did not sleep again that night. In the morning, she went downstairs and, after some hesitation, mentioned the incident to the woman at the front desk. She expected polite dismissal. She got something very different. The woman behind the desk went quiet for a moment, then asked Rachel which room she was in. When Rachel told her the room number, the woman nodded slowly and said, and this is almost word for word what Rachel reported. She said, "That room has a history. We don't usually tell guests unless they ask." Rachel asked. The woman told her that in the early 1900s a man had died in that room, not peacefully. He had been ill for a very long time, bedridden, and in his final weeks he would allegedly wander the room at night, too confused from fever to stay in bed, circling the room, breathing heavily in the dark. Staff and guests over the decades had occasionally reported sounds in that room that they could not explain. The inn had never changed the room number. They had never publicized it. They simply waited to see if guests would notice. Rachel checked out that morning. She drove to a chain hotel 15 minutes away with fluorescent lighting and a lobby that smelled like cleaning products, and she slept for 12 hours straight. She told this story to her sister, who told it to a friend, who eventually posted it in a travel forum online. Rachel later confirmed every detail when contacted by someone documenting paranormal accounts in historic southern inns. She never went back to Savannah, but she said the strangest part of the whole experience was not the breathing itself. The strangest part was this: when she was lying there in the dark the second time, just before she turned on the flashlight, she had the overwhelming sense that whatever was in that room was not trying to scare her. It was simply there, present, occupying the same space it had always occupied, as if she was the intruder, and it was simply waiting for her to leave. Take a breath, because the second story is different in a way that is going to sit with you. This one comes from a couple, Marcus and Diana, both in their late 30s, from a suburb of Chicago. They had been married for 11 years and had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, ages 8 and 5. In the summer of 2021, they decided to take a family road trip. The destination was a cabin rental in the mountains of North Carolina. They found it on one of those vacation rental platforms. Beautiful photos, great reviews, reasonable price. A wooden cabin tucked into the trees with a porch and a hot tub and a fire pit. The listing described it as secluded and peaceful. That part was accurate. The rest of what they found, there was something the listing very deliberately did not mention. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon after about 9 hours of driving. The kids were restless and tired and immediately ran around the cabin, exploring, the way kids do. Marcus got the bags from the car while Diana figured out the coffee maker and tried to pull up the Wi-Fi password. The cabin was exactly as pictured. Knotty pine walls, stone fireplace, quilts on the beds, little ceramic bears on the windowsills. Charming and rustic, and exactly what they'd wanted. They had dinner, got the kids to bed, sat on the porch with their drinks and listened to the sounds of the woods at night, owls and wind and the distant sound of what might have been a creek. It was perfect. They went to bed feeling like the trip was going to be exactly what they needed. At some point in the night, their daughter Emma, the 5-year-old, came into their room. This wasn't unusual. Emma was a light sleeper and would sometimes wander in if she heard a noise or had a bad dream. Diana pulled back the covers and Emma climbed in between them without a word, which also wasn't particularly unusual for a tired 5-year-old. They all went back to sleep. In the morning at breakfast, Diana asked Emma if she'd had a bad dream, the reason she'd assumed Emma came in during the night. Emma looked at her mother with the perfectly calm matter-of-fact expression that only very young children can manage and said, "I didn't have a bad dream. The old woman told me to come sleep with you." Diana stopped pouring orange juice. She asked Emma very carefully, very calmly, "What old woman?" Emma said there had been an old woman standing in the doorway of the kids' room. "Not scary," Emma said. "She had white hair, and she was wearing a long dress, and she was just standing there looking at them." She had pointed at the door to Marcus and Diana's room, and Emma had understood somehow that she was supposed to go. So she went. Her brother, the 8-year-old, had apparently slept through the whole thing. Marcus and Diana looked at each other across the breakfast table. They did the thing parents do where they communicate entire conversations with their eyes in about 1 second. Then they both looked back at Emma and asked her to describe the woman again. Emma described her in the way 5-year-olds describe things, with imperfect vocabulary and total sincerity. She was old. She had long white hair that was a little messy. Her dress went all the way to the floor. She didn't say anything. She just pointed. Diana went back to the vacation rental listing on her phone that afternoon and read through every single review again. She had skimmed them before booking, looking mostly at ratings and comments about cleanliness and check-in instructions. This time she read every word. Most of the reviews were normal. "Beautiful cabin, great location, amazing views," would come back. But near the bottom, buried under dozens of positive reviews, was one from about 2 years prior. It was short. It said, "Wonderful cabin, cozy and warm. My daughter, who is 6, asked about the old lady in her room the first night. We had a lovely stay but wanted to mention it in case others experienced the same." Diana showed Marcus. Marcus found the name of the property management company and called them from the porch while the kids played in the yard. He asked if there was any history to the cabin he should know about. The woman on the phone paused, then said the original owner of the land, an elderly woman who had built the first structure on that property over a century ago, had died on the property. She said some guests over the years had reported things, but that most guests had perfectly normal stays, and there was nothing dangerous about the cabin. She said it somewhat rehearsed, like she'd said it before. They stayed. Marcus and Diana talked it over and decided not to leave, partly because it seemed overreactive and partly because Emma herself seemed completely unbothered. She had not been scared, she had been guided. That distinction felt important to them, though neither of them could entirely explain why. They finished their week in the cabin. Nothing else happened. No more nighttime visitors. No sounds, no shadows, nothing the rest of the family noticed. On their last morning, when they were loading the car to leave, Emma walked back to the front door of the cabin, stood there for a second and waved. Just a small, simple wave, like she was saying goodbye to someone standing just inside. Then she turned and got in the car. Diana said she almost asked her daughter who she was waving to. She decided she didn't want to know. There's something about the way children experience these things that is almost more unsettling than the events themselves. They don't have the defense mechanisms adults have, the immediate impulse to rationalize and explain. They simply see what they see and report it without drama. Emma was not traumatized, she was not disturbed. She slept fine the rest of the week. What that tells us, if we're willing to sit with it for a moment, is something this community at the Fear Sermon has talked about many times. The most frightening encounters are not always the violent ones or the dramatic ones. Sometimes the most enduring ones are the quiet ones. The ones where whatever is present is simply present, existing alongside you, aware of you, perhaps even looking out for you in its own way, and that is somehow more difficult to process than outright terror because it doesn't give you a clean emotional response. It just leaves you with questions. Get ready for the third story because this one is different from both of the others. This one doesn't involve a ghost. It doesn't involve anything supernatural at all, and it might be the most frightening story of the three precisely because of that. This account comes from a man named Joel, who shared it in detail on a true crime and personal safety forum about 3 years ago. Joel was in his mid 40s at the time of the incident, a sales manager who traveled frequently for work and was also an experienced independent traveler. He was not easily rattled. He had stayed in hundreds of hotels, airports, unfamiliar cities. He considered himself street, smart, and observant. He was the kind of person who, if you met him at a party and he told you he'd had a terrifying experience, you would immediately take it seriously. Joel was on vacation in a coastal city. He hasn't specified which one publicly, and for reasons that will become clear, that's probably appropriate. He was traveling alone, taking a week off after a particularly grueling quarter at work. He'd rented a small apartment through a short-term rental platform rather than staying in a hotel, wanting a bit more space and a kitchen. The apartment was in a nice area, well-reviewed, hosted by someone with dozens of positive reviews and a verified profile. He arrived, let himself in with a code on the lockbox, and found the apartment exactly as described. Clean, comfortable, well-stocked. He settled in, went out for dinner, walked along the waterfront, and returned feeling relaxed. On his second night there, Joel woke up around 3 in the morning with an odd feeling. He described it the way people who have experienced genuine threats sometimes describe it, not panic, not fear exactly, but a kind of sharpening of the senses, a sudden animal alertness. He lay still for a moment, listening. The apartment was quiet. The street outside was quiet. He told himself it was nothing and closed his eyes again. And then he heard it, a sound, very subtle, coming from the direction of the living room, a soft sound, almost rhythmic, like something shifting its weight. Joel was still. He did not move. He lay there with his eyes open and he thought very carefully. His phone was on the nightstand beside him. He picked it up slowly and instead of turning on a light or calling out, he opened the camera app and switched it to selfie mode, which gave him a reverse image of the room behind him without him having to turn around. He held it up at an angle, adjusting slowly until he could see the doorway to the bedroom in the small screen. There was a shape in the doorway. Joel said it took him a second to understand what he was seeing because his mind didn't want to accept it. But it was a person. Someone was standing in the doorway of his bedroom, partially in shadow, completely still, watching him. Joel did not move. He did not make a sound. He stared at the shape in the camera screen, trying to see details, trying to confirm what his eyes were telling him. And then the shape shifted just slightly, the way a person shifts when they realize the person they're watching might be waking up. What Joel did next was the decision, he says, that he believes kept him safe. He did not confront the person. He did not shout or challenge. Instead, very calmly, he said out loud, not in a panicked voice but in a normal, conversational tone, "Hey, I'm going to need you to leave now." He said it the way you might say it to a house guest who had overstayed their welcome. Matter of fact. No escalation, no threat, just a clear statement. There was a pause. Then the shape moved. He heard footsteps, soft and quick, and then the sound of the front door. A click, silence. Joel sat up, turned on every light in the apartment, and called the emergency number. The police came. They found that the front door was locked, but one of the windows in the living room was not properly latched. Someone had come in through that window. The apartment was a second-floor unit, and there was a fire escape on the side of the building that made access from that window relatively simple if you knew it was there. The police asked Joel if anything was missing. Nothing was. His wallet and passport and laptop were all exactly where he'd left them. The person in the doorway had not come for his belongings, or if they had, they hadn't gotten to that part yet. The police took a report. They were professional and thorough, but they were also, Joel noted, not particularly surprised. They told him that this type of incident, someone entering an occupied short-term rental, was more common than most people realized, particularly in high-tourism areas where there was a constant turnover of unfamiliar guests who didn't know the neighborhood and often didn't take standard precautions with windows and doors. They also told him something that he found particularly disturbing. They said that the person who had entered was almost certainly not a stranger to the apartment. The way they accessed it, knowing which window was unreliable, knowing the layout of the space well enough to navigate it in the dark, suggested someone who had been in the apartment before. Maybe many times, Joel filed a report with the rental platform. He moved to a hotel for the rest of his trip. He posted his account online as a warning, with very specific advice for other solo travelers. Never assume a good rating means total safety. Always check every window when you arrive. Always put something in front of the bedroom door before you sleep, even in a seemingly secure place. A chair, your suitcase, anything that will make a sound if the door is pushed open, anything that gives you a moment of warning. He also said that the thing he thought about most afterward was the stillness of that figure in the doorway. Whoever it was had been standing there for some time before Joel woke up. They had been watching him sleep, and they had done it quietly enough, patiently enough, that in a different version of that night he might never have woken up at all. Joel said he was grateful he was a light sleeper. He said he was grateful his instinct was caution rather than confrontation. He said he was grateful that he kept his voice calm when he spoke into the dark. And then he said something that has stayed with everyone who read his account. He said the thing that scared him most was not the moment he saw the shape. It was the moment lying in bed before he checked the camera, when he felt that something was wrong. Because that feeling had been right, and it made him wonder how many other times in his life he had felt that feeling and talked himself out of it. How many times that quiet animal alarm had gone off inside him, and he had overridden it with logic and reasonableness. He said that night taught him to listen to himself, not to panic, not to assume danger where there isn't any, but to take that feeling seriously instead of immediately dismissing it. That is perhaps the most useful thing any of these three stories can leave you with. Not just the fear, though the fear is real and earned, but the lesson underneath it. Rachel in Savannah learned that some places carry their history, whether we know it or not. Diana and Marcus and little Emma learned that the things children see with their uncomplicated eyes might sometimes be worth listening to rather than explaining away. And Joel learned that the instinct wired into your nervous system, the one that goes quiet and sharp when something is wrong, is not your imagination. It is one of the oldest survival tools you have, and it is worth trusting. Vacations are supposed to be escapes. We go to new places to feel free, to step outside the routine, to see something different, and most of the time, that is exactly what we get. Beautiful places, wonderful memories, stories we tell at dinner tables for years. But occasionally, and this is the thing that this community at the Fear Sermon keeps coming back to, occasionally those unfamiliar places show us something we weren't expecting. Sometimes it's something from the past that never fully left. Sometimes it's something in the present that reminds us how vulnerable we actually are when we step outside the bubble of everything familiar. And sometimes it's something we can't categorize at all, something that sits at the edge of our understanding and refuses to be filed away neatly. These three people went on vacation. They came home, and they are not the same as they were when they left. Not in a broken way, not in a way that ruined travel for them forever, though Joel admittedly is significantly more careful now about where he books his accommodations, but in the way that a real experience changes you, in the way that having your assumptions challenged, genuinely and undeniably, leaves a permanent fingerprint on how you see the world. If you have a story like this, something that happened to you or someone you know in an unfamiliar place, on a trip, in a hotel, in a rental, anywhere away from home, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. Be as specific as you're comfortable with. The Fear Sermon community is one of the most thoughtful and genuine spaces for these kinds of accounts, and so many of the best stories we've shared on this channel have come directly from you, from people who needed to tell what happened to them and just needed the right place to do it. Share this video with someone who loves a good, true, scary story, especially someone who's planning a trip. Not to scare them out of going, but because they deserve to know that paying attention, staying aware, and trusting their instincts is always the right call, no matter where they are. Every week on the Fear Sermon, we bring you stories like these, true accounts, real people, real fear. The kind of stories that make you think twice before you reach for the lamp, or check your phone camera in the dark, or wave at something standing in a doorway you pretended not to see. If this is your first time here, subscribe. We are building something here together, a community of people who take these experiences seriously, who believe that the unexplained deserves honest attention, and who understand that sometimes the most important stories are the ones nobody else wanted to tell. We'll see you in the next one, and until then, stay safe out there, especially when you're away from home.